A handful of men in the dark, a small boat slipping silently across a harbor, a few devices no larger than a dinner plate, carried by hand. And by the time the sun rose, ships were thousands of times the cost of those little devices lay crippled or sinking at their moorings. There were no aircraft, no torpedoes, no great guns. There was only a clever piece of engineering, a few brave men willing to risk everything, and the simple, devastating principle that you do not need to be powerful to sink a powerful ship. You only need to get close and to know exactly where to strike. This is the story of the limpet mine, one of the most elegant and economical weapons of the entire war. This is a tale of asymmetric warfare at its finest, of how the weak can strike at the strong through ingenuity and daring rather than brute force. It is a story about a weapon that turned small teams of determined men into a threat that could menace entire fleets, and about the clever science that made it possible. And it reveals, once again, one of the great recurring lessons of the war, that the cheapest and simplest tools, wielded with courage and intelligence, can achieve results out of all proportion to their size and cost. To understand why the limpet mine was such a brilliant solution, you first have to understand the problem it was designed to solve. Throughout the war, ships were of immense importance. Warships projected power across the seas. Cargo vessels carried the supplies that kept armies fighting and nations functioning. Harbors were crowded with these vessels, the lifeblood of the war effort flowing through them, and naturally, both sides wanted to destroy the enemy's ships. But sinking a ship is not easy. Ships are large, tough, and heavily defended. The conventional ways of attacking them with aircraft, submarines, or surface warships required enormous resources and faced formidable defenses. But what if there was another way? What if, instead of attacking a ship with overwhelming force from a distance, you could get up close, in secret, and place a charge directly against the hull below the waterline where the damage would be most devastating? A relatively small explosive charge detonated against the hull beneath the water could breach the ship and let the sea pour in, doing far more damage than the same charge would do elsewhere. The challenge was how to get the charge there, how to attach it to the hull, and how to give the people placing it time to escape before it exploded. The limpet mine was the ingenious answer to all of these challenges. The weapon took its name from the limpet, a small sea creature that clings tightly to rocks, because that is exactly what the device did. It clung to the hull of a ship, and the mechanism by which it clung was the key to its brilliance. The limpet mine used magnets to attach itself to the steel hull of a vessel. A person could simply place the device against the metal hull, and the magnets would hold it firmly in place, even underwater. This was a wonderfully simple solution to the problem of attachment. There was no need for complicated clamps or fasteners. The natural force of magnetism did the work, holding the explosive charge securely against the target until it detonated. Now, we should be honest about the history here, because the limpet mine and the operations that used it are real and well documented, though we will describe the technical details in general terms. What follows is a retelling grounded in the genuine existence of this weapon and the real raids in which it was employed, told as a narrative to convey its full significance. The core is true. The limpet mine was a real weapon that used magnetic attachment to affix explosive charges to ship hulls, and it was used in daring raids that achieved remarkable successes. The details are recounted to illuminate just how clever and effective this device truly was. The device incorporated several brilliant features beyond its magnetic attachment. Crucially, it included a delay mechanism, a timer that allowed the people placing the mine to set it and then escape before the explosion. This was essential because the whole point of the weapon was that it was placed by hand, up close, by people who needed to get away safely afterward. The delay gave them time to slip back into the darkness to make their escape before the charges detonated and the alarm was raised. Without this feature, the weapon would have been useless for its intended purpose, a suicide device rather than a tool of clandestine sabotage. The timer transformed it into a practical weapon of stealth. The weapon was designed to be used by small teams operating in secret, often approaching their targets in the dark, sometimes swimming or using small boats to reach the ships moored in a harbor. The operatives would carry the limpet mines to the target vessels, place them against the hulls, below the waterline, set the timers, and then withdraw. Hours later, when the team was safely away, the mines would explode, breaching the hulls and sending water flooding into the ships. A vessel that had taken years to build and represented an enormous investment of resources could be crippled or sunk by a few small devices placed by a handful of men. Consider the extraordinary economy of this approach. The conventional means of attacking ships, the aircraft and submarines and warships, were enormously expensive and required vast resources to build, operate, and risk. The limpet mine, by contrast, was cheap and small. The teams that used it were few in number, and yet the damage they could inflict was immense, potentially destroying targets worth thousands of times the cost of the entire operation. This is the essence of asymmetric warfare, the use of cheap, clever means to inflict damage far out of proportion to the resources expended. The limpet mine allowed a small, determined force to threaten the most valuable assets of a much more powerful enemy. But it would be a mistake to focus only on the cleverness of the device and forget the extraordinary courage of the people who used it, because for all its ingenuity, the limpet mine was only as effective as the brave individuals willing to carry it into the heart of enemy-held harbors, and the work they did was breathtakingly dangerous. Picture what it actually required: approaching an enemy harbor in secret, evading patrols and sentries, often in cold, dark water, carrying explosive devices, reaching the target ships without being detected, placing the mines against the hulls, working carefully and quietly, knowing that discovery meant almost certain death, and then making the long, perilous escape, all before the mines exploded and the enemy realized what had happened. The men who carried out these raids were among the bravest of the war. They operated deep in enemy territory with no support, relying entirely on stealth and nerve. They faced the constant risk of detection, capture, and execution. They endured physical hardships that are difficult to imagine: cold, exhaustion, fear, and they did it knowing that the odds were often stacked heavily against them, that many such raids ended in disaster, that the chances of returning safely were sometimes slim. Theirs was a special kind of courage, the courage of men who volunteered for missions of extreme danger, who placed themselves in the most perilous situations imaginable, all for the chance to strike a blow against the enemy. There is a profound principle at work in the story of the limpet mine, and it concerns the relationship between vulnerability and value. The most valuable assets, the great ships, were also, in a sense, the most vulnerable to this kind of attack, precisely because they were large, stationary targets that had to sit in harbors where they could be approached. Their very size and value made them targets worth the enormous risk of a limpet raid, and their presence in harbors, necessary for their operation and maintenance, created the opportunity for clandestine attack. The weapon exploited a fundamental vulnerability of even the mightiest vessels: the need to come to rest in places where a determined enemy might reach them. This points to a recurring truth about power and vulnerability that extends far beyond naval warfare. The most powerful and valuable things often have hidden vulnerabilities, points of weakness that can be exploited by those clever and daring enough to find them. A great ship seems invincible, a triumph of engineering and firepower, but it has a hull, and that hull can be breached, and a few magnets and a small charge placed in the right spot can bring it low. The lesson is that strength in one dimension does not guarantee security in all dimensions, and that even the mightiest assets can be threatened by those who understand where their vulnerabilities lie. Consider, too, what the limpet mine meant for the strategic balance of the war at sea. The mere existence of this threat forced the enemy to take expensive and burdensome precautions. Harbors had to be guarded against clandestine attack. Patrols had to watch for intruders. Defensive measures had to be implemented to protect ships at their moorings. All of this consumed resources and attention that could have been devoted elsewhere. The threat of the limpet mine, like the threat of the disguised coal we discussed earlier, imposed costs on the enemy far beyond the actual damage it inflicted, by forcing them to defend against an attack that could come at any time from the darkness, by means they could not easily counter. There is also something to be appreciated in the sheer ingenuity of the engineering, the way the device elegantly solved each of the problems involved in its mission. The challenge of attachment was solved by magnetism. The challenge of escape was solved by the timer. The challenge of maximizing damage was solved by placing the charge below the waterline, where the inrushing sea would do the work. Each element of the design addressed a specific requirement, and together they produced a weapon that was simple, reliable, and devastatingly effective. This is engineering at its best, the elegant solution of a complex problem through clever, focused design. The limpet mine was a small masterpiece of practical invention. It is worth reflecting on how this weapon embodied a particular philosophy of warfare, one that valued cleverness and daring over brute force. The approach represented by the limpet mine was not about overwhelming the enemy with superior firepower. It was about finding the clever angle, the unexpected approach, the point of vulnerability, and exploiting it with skill and courage. This philosophy recognized that you do not always need to be stronger than your enemy to hurt him. You need to be smarter, more daring, more willing to take risks, and find unconventional solutions. It is the philosophy of the underdog, the approach of those who cannot win through sheer power and so must win through ingenuity instead. The success of the limpet mine and the raids that employed it also demonstrated the outsized impact that small numbers of exceptional people can have. A handful of brave and skilled operatives, equipped with clever weapons, could achieve results that might otherwise require entire fleets or air forces. This concentration of impact in small, elite teams was a model that would influence special operations for generations to come. The idea that a small group of highly trained, highly motivated individuals could strike decisive blows against a much larger enemy became one of the enduring lessons of the war, and the limpet mine was one of the tools that proved it. What makes this story endure is the combination of cleverness and courage at its heart, the marriage of ingenious engineering with extraordinary human bravery. The limpet mine was a brilliant device, but it was nothing without the men willing to carry it into harm's way. And those men, for all their courage, needed the clever weapon to make their daring effective. Together, the weapon and the warriors represented something remarkable, a way for the determined and the inventive to challenge even the most powerful enemy. It is a testament to what becomes possible when human ingenuity and human courage combine in service of a cause. By the time the war ended, the limpet mine had earned its place in the history of naval warfare and special operations. It had demonstrated that small teams could threaten great fleets, that cheap devices could destroy expensive ships, and that ingenuity and daring could overcome superior force. Its descendants would continue to play a role in conflicts long after the war, and the principles it embodied, the value of stealth, the power of asymmetric attack, the impact of small elite teams, would shape military thinking for decades. The tiny magnetic mine had proven that in war, as in so much else, size and strength are not everything, and that the clever and the brave can punch far above their weight. So the next time you imagine the great naval battles of the war, the clashing fleets and the mighty warships, remember also the quiet raids in the darkness, the small teams slipping into enemy harbors, the little magnetic devices clinging to the hulls of great ships. Remember the brave men who carried them and the clever minds who designed them. And remember the enduring truth at the heart of the limpet mine, that you do not need to be the most powerful to strike a powerful blow, that the right tool in the right place can topple a giant, and that courage and ingenuity together can accomplish what brute force alone never could.